Hello and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a conversation about life, the universe, and anything in between. My name is Megan Rounds, and welcome to the show. This is now the third appearance for today's guest. I don't know, does that call her, does that constitute a regular? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see what she thinks. But she lives in Georgia with her wife, 10-year-old son, and 13-year-old daughter. She joined the Lightworkers Lab 3 years ago, and since then has become a moderator in the main lab and co-teacher of the Psychic Development Circle, or the PDC. She's an archangel reader, healer, and direct speech channel. She's come a long way from her early career days as an avionics technician in the United States Air Force and her experience in fitness and health program management and coaching. Those are things she's done. Now she's self-employed as owner of Soulful Transformations, which focuses on spiritual, emotional, and intuitive intelligent design. Members of the lab may have heard of her program Body of Light, which I've personally participated in and highly recommend. And I really do, because it was a while ago now, I don't remember, Lauren, when I think that was the end of last year. And it's still having a very dramatic impact on my life. So highly recommend that. I'll post her details while we wait for her to come on. And let's give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Lauren Antuofermo. Hello.
Hey,
Welcome back.
thank you. It's funny when I was hearing that, I thought of how Saturday Night Live, they get like awards, or like if you go on more than 5 times, it's like a big thing. And I'm like, ooh, I'm like the Saturday Night Live special team.
Hey, I'm going to have to think of that, because, what can we do to celebrate? You're the very first person to be on 3 times, and I'm
Yes.
happy and also honored that it's you. I love having conversations with you. So in the past, the first time we talked about your spiritual journey and things like that, and then we went a little bit deeper into some things last time. And this time, for me, it's very intentionally spirit guided. We didn't talk at all about what we might talk about today, Lauren and I. We just were like, we've done this before, let's just go for it.
Yeah. I know our conversations are always good. They just like flow all over the place. So
Yeah, really fun. So, okay, well, so let's start with what's on your mind.
it's funny whenever you open with a card, it's like always relative to like the dominant energy right now, or like really, really connected to it. I don't know if it's just me, but I think that that presence, that's always a teaching, like to be present, but it's like really becoming more like situational now. Like it's becoming more that the more present we are, the better we assimilate whatever like lessons or energies or whatever it is that we're wanting to like upgrade or expand in, or especially on the spiritual journey, that we kind of look for this ascension, right? Which kind of makes it look like we're never ascended, like we're always trying to reach for something. But like the ascension is like, rather than looking at it as some place to go, is more kind of within. And I think that present time, like time management, all the things that we think of like a hectic daily life, those things kind of like usurp our identity here, because then we forget to express ourselves. And so it's not even so much about like, oh, you're wrong if you're not being present. It's more about like, when you're present, you can see things clearly. You can feel your own awareness better, and you're not as like succumbing to the environment around you. You're more like playing with the environment around you, or connected to it in a more, I guess, dominant way, in a more like fluid way, because trying to catch hold of something that isn't there is like always keeping us in this like anxious feeling. And I think that's something for me that I've been really, really, really aware of, that the less that I feel joy for like my day-to-day stuff, the more difficulty I wind up engaging in. And then the less that I try to hold on to the present moment, the more the present comes in. Like when I try to be present, I get out of the present moment. It's like, it's such a paradox, but it's more about like being settled with your current situation rather than trying to release it. Like releasing constantly is something that I think is like overpowering our joy, and we get away from what is being presented for our joy. So I just wanted to, like, that was the first thing that like lit up for me when you were talking. And I was like, all right, that's a good start, because this present thing, this present time, like it's really showing up for me very strongly. Like I'm a doer, but when the doing becomes so overwhelming, I'm a procrastinator.
Hello,
And,
me too.
yeah. So, and I think it's very common. I think it's so common because of the amount of distractions and stuff that we feel we have to attain, that we lose ourselves. Like we lose the thing that we came here to experience. And I think more and more I'm appreciating myself, which is really weird to say. It's so weird, but it also feels like so good to release, like to release having to control everything.
Yes. Oh man, there's so many things in there. I'm taking copious notes, as I always do, because you say so many wonderful things. And yes, I can go back and watch the video, but it's like, and I plan to, but you know, everything you said resonates with me. There's something about, you know, where you were saying, you didn't word it quite like this, but chasing the ascension process, which to me, I wrote down goals. It's something that happened years ago in school, and I graduated with this doctorate degree, and me and many of the other people who took this program with me were like, now what? We achieved this goal, and then we're like, all right, cool. And, you know, it wasn't like things magically appeared for us as a result of that. And there was a shift of our identity, because we then had a title that most of us don't even know what to do with today. And that was like 10 years ago. And that goal thing is this. I think I had a conversation with Megan Hawkins, who was also,
oh my gosh, she's so lovely.
She's so awesome. We were talking about really being interested in mountain climbing, movies, books, all of the things around that. And I think for me, at least, it had a lot to do with recognizing that that was a goal. And then there's this statistic that like 80% of deaths that happen in mountain climbing adventures happen on the way down. And it's like, yeah, because they reach their goal and then they're like, okay. And, you know, they don't have the same intention on the way down.
Right. Yeah. It's so true. I think, sorry, go ahead. You were going to say?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think that like, it's so funny that you mentioned mountain climbing, because we have this like goal orientation, which is always present, because there's never a time where we're not wanting to expand or do something more, right? Like that's the whole point of being alive. But the problem comes in when we see that as a disconnect from the process, right? Like from the goal itself is just a desire to receive, but that receiving like allows us to feel the joy of communicating like with the process, right? So it's always present time that we're communicating with that goal. And if the goal doesn't satisfy, we are like looking at the goal as something to make us better than we are, but it's like we are better just by the journey of it. So it kind of like
so true.
Right.
My husband had he's a really good mirror of things that I didn't know were in my unconscious, and he likes to surface those. That's a nice way to put it. And his thing about this program was like that it was a waste of time. And I'm like, I don't believe any of it was a waste of time. It is the reason I had a spiritual awakening. That was not the goal of that program. It was not my goal going into that program either, but it is the reason I am where I am today, here with you having this conversation. And there are a lot of other things that were beneficial from it. Oddly enough, the actual educational part that was the content of the program is not the thing I would list as the most important part of it.
You know, but there's so many things. And like, I think that's the problem with goal orientation, is that we miss the nuance.
Yeah.
When I was like struggling as an authoritative like person in my field, right? And I was connecting to people that saw me as an authority, and I was like, no, I don't want that authority. I want you to see what you can do for yourself, right? That kind of like usurped my joy for the program itself. Like when I was talking to people about health and fitness all the time, and I was speaking in large audiences and across the country in a lot of different, experiences, those people were looking for answers for their issues with the program itself, but they weren't seeing how to receive what they needed from the program. They were only looking for ways to, release or reject the fitness program, right? The fitness program
Oh.
for the Air Force is a test. And it's this test that you have to pass in order to maintain your position in the Air Force. But it's a very like minuscule amount of exercise that you have to do to maintain it. But for a lot of people, it doesn't make sense to them. They don't understand the value of it. They don't understand the power of like why it's there. So there's all this dissent against it. When I would go to those places to talk and research their programs and see how to implement it within the rules and all this stuff, right? There was this point of attraction that said, you're the problem because you're the one that's in authority over the program, right? So you have to do something about this. But the program itself was not the issue. It was the way it was being implemented that was the issue in many cases. So when we take the responsibility of like the program, like talking about like a program, right? As what we need to do to fix it or to feel better about it or to change it to match what we want, we're not doing the work. We're not doing the work of the program. We're doing the work of what we need from it. So the point being that even though some people failed and got out of the military, they were probably never wanting to be in the military in the first place. A lot of people find that they go into the military for a short amount of time. They don't do it lifers, but lifers see that as the goal. I'm a lifer, right? I have to stick to this program. I have to stick to this, program because it gives me the benefits of being in the military. But for some people who didn't want to be in the military, that program, it was a way to get out. So instead of like looking at it that way, they saw it as the thing that made them get out of the military. But if the military was important to them, it was a very easy program to implement and maintain.
Yeah.
So it really depended on where are you situated. The military may have brought them like big new educational opportunities, big new opportunities, big, like all these changes happen when you go in the military and they're amazing, but they're not meant for lifetime dedication for most people.
Right.
So when people got out of there thinking that they failed, but they moved into something they loved, they don't see that time as a waste. Hopefully they see it as an avenue to get to where they were.
Yep.
So nothing about like me being an avionics technician and being on the flight line and working in a shop and working avionics and technology and all that stuff was a waste to me, even though I have no idea how to do that now. Like seriously, I was like at the top of my game. And now if you ask me, what Lantern stood for, which was the program that I used, that I was my career, I would never be able to tell you. I'd be like, oh God, what was that?
Yeah.
But like my journey through that was so important to my life, so important to my life. So, and when I'm talking about the fitness program wasn't what I was going to do for the rest of my life, but it gave me the speaking, introduction to large groups that I wanted to, that I found the passion for. It gave me the idea of how to create large group programs for people. And it gave me the energy to know like how to connect with like people in authority, how to show up, how to do things. Everything that I learned from that program, I can now apply to my business today.
I love that. I love that you brought that up. For those of you who are watching who aren't aware, both Lauren and I are veterans of different military branches. Lauren was in the Air Force, I was in the Navy. And I joined the Navy when I was 27, which is unusual. Typically, people join closely or right after high school. And I won't go into the reasons why. I wasn't escaping a horrible situation, but it was a bit of an escape for me. So
yeah, for most people it is. It really is.
And so when I joined, I was assigned to a ship, and there were a couple of different things. In boot camp, I was trying to lay low. I just wanted to go through it and really be invisible. But I was book smart, so we had a test, like the very first test, and I got like a 97 or 98, and the person they had assigned as a yeoman failed the test. So they, and I really, in retrospect, wish they would have handled it differently, but this is the way the military does things. It's like, you're out, you're in, right? So I was all of a sudden yeoman. I'm like, man, I'm sorry, but she's like, I don't care. I didn't want it anyway. And I'm like, neither do I. But that was kind of like a big babysitter job. So I had to keep track of all the people in our company, which is 69 people and women. And it was like I had to know where they were at all times. I could be stopped at any time and inspected for my records and everything else. They always had to be up to date. Well, I was good at that and had life experience in something similar to that. And so I did well. And then when I was assigned to a ship, I fell in with a really great group of people, but they had different extracurricular kind of things, like a command career counselor, which sounds a lot bigger than it was. But I talked to people about what they might like to do with their lives in the Navy, and training petty officer, which was keeping track of the training. And I also did performance reviews and things because I had a computer and I computerized it, and much to the chagrin of some of my shipmates who did not have that capability. And then all of a sudden the chief petty officer is like, everybody should do this. And it's like, I didn't want it like that, But I fell into these things that later in life were the foundation for human resources, which is where I started my professional career. And I had no idea. Those were just things that I kind of thought were interesting and, got me out of other work in a sense.
Yes.
But I also ran under helicopters and, did like flight ops and stuff like that. And I was on the bridge and did all kinds of different activities and trainings around very, very Navy things, like underway replenishments and stuff like that, which absolutely, if they stuck me on a ship, there's no way I would remember it. I just remember being able to go to San Francisco for a while for the training. Yeah. I don't actually remember what they taught me. I remember what we did after the training, going around bars and dance, that was like a whole other, the social scene was fun. But I didn't know at the time. And I wasn't a huge fan of being in the military, but I got to see the world. And I had no intention of staying in long term, but there were many people that I worked with who did. And they definitely did perceive things differently. And that fitness thing was one of them. I ran for stress. I mean, I was stressed out being on a ship contained. I'm a person who needs to go. Yeah. I'm an expansive, it's like I'm free-spirited that way. So being contained in a ship with 1,500 people in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, I ran a lot. And then when I could, I'd swim. But other people were like dreading it. And just to hear that you had a program, I don't recall a program on our ship. I remember it being, when we get to Dubai, you're going to do the physical fitness test. And it's like, I'm like, yay. And everyone else is like, Yeah. But they made it. I don't remember anybody being kicked out that I knew of, but there were people who just weren't able to do that physical fitness. And they didn't really understand the purpose of it other than that it was a necessary evil. And I looked at it as a gauge because when you run on a ship, it's like running on a hill because the ship is going to and fro. And so I was in tip-top shape. I missed that. I kind of want to be on a ship right now and start doing
I know, me too, right? Like where you have to go, and I'm like, I know. It's really cool that we have that in common. And I almost forgot there for a minute, like when I brought it up. So things like are so synchronistic, I swear. But I feel like, no matter what, there's always this perspective like something is wrong that we have to fix, right? Like there's something wrong that we have to fix. And I think that's the detriment of what most light workers come across, is that I have to fix myself, or I have to fix the world, or I have to fix others. And when we do that so much, like we really destroy the love that is available, like to our energy, like at that moment, because, simply said, when we're in love, it lights up, like it just connects, it just creates opportunities, it creates, solutions, it creates well-being. And we think of ourselves as problems, not as creators, right? And I think that that's something personally that I have struggled with. And I think that's why, when you talk about the body of light, it's really ways to come back to the self, really ways to assess the emotions, really ways to assess your value in all of this gigantic universe. Like we talk about the universe and the multiverse and the millions of lives and the past lives and the future lives and the soulmate, all the things, but we forget where we are perceiving that from.
Yes.
Ourselves, and like whenever I see somebody like struggling with like a pattern, right? Like a pattern in their life, I always go back to, well, what is it that they fear that they're not worthy of, right? And it's like, well, whatever you fear is the thing that you operate from until you find out that there's no such thing as needing to be more whole. It's just wholeness creating a bigger awareness of itself, right? Like it's just wholeness creating more wholeness instead of fear creating more, suffering in order to create wholeness. And like I talk about that a lot because for me, the message always was, you got to be better than you are. You got to be, and I think that's for all of us, even in, the spiritual community where we go for solace, we go for support, we go for energy, we go for the love, and we go for the light. And it helps us to know that God doesn't judge anything, so that when we can release the fear of what we're not doing correctly, we can increase the light that we wanted to be anyway, that we wanted to like crystallize, that we wanted to manifest. And I think for me, that whole presence of mind to see what is and what isn't true to source is that enlightenment. The enlightenment is to say, I am that I am so that I can become. Like it's an interesting paradox, but it's the way we create. And when we look at something that's being destroyed or taken or moved or not working out, and we say, oh, that's meant to be, that's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen to make you fear, your unworthiness or make you fear what you're not doing correctly. It happens so that you can move away from what's harming you. You know what I mean? Like, and when we look at it that way, we don't see ourselves as sufferers to learn a lesson. We see ourselves as beginning again, or trusting that we can have a new power, a new authority, a new identity with a new circumstance, so that we don't have to depend on what's being taken to make us fear that we deserved some kind of punishment or bad energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's so hard to do that. I have to say, I mean, for me, it is.
Yeah.
It's, and yet it's amazing this time around. And I say this time around because this is a pattern in my life, going through self-examination, really understanding what's my role in this life that I have created. And, it used to be that I didn't look at it as being a creator. So that's one of the things that's different this time around.
Yeah.
But there are big, large life patterns that are repeating, and they're almost converging. Multiple patterns are converging all at once. I think it's kind of like ice water being poured over my head for a reality check, because I get stuck in these patterns, and this is like, wake up.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. This is what's true. And a big part of that is remembering the many, 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 many things in our society that have created in me interpretations that are limiting beliefs. And so, like, as you'd mentioned, things about problems, that's such a big thing. I was raised by a perfectionist who was raised by a perfectionist who was probably raised by a perfectionist. There's a long, long line of perfectionism in one side of my family for sure. And I grew up feeling I wasn't good enough. And there's other situations that recently surfaced for me based on when I was born and the conditions, circumstances around that were aggravated by that need for perfectionism, as well as the thing around, like, don't be so sensitive and crying and trying to really contain my emotions. And apparently I was a pretty emotional child in the sense that I contained it, but I still couldn't contain it well. So I would cry, and then I'd be mad at myself for crying because I was showing my dad that I was upset when I didn't want him to know it. My daughter, who I wish wouldn't contain those emotions, is amazingly good at that. She can just, she won't cry until later, but she does cry, and I want her to cry, and I kind of make her cry. You know?
I can't even, how old, I can't even, my daughter's
She's
13
12.
years old, and I'm trying to, that's hard. That's hard. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
She does the same thing. And I'm like, I would have died for my mom to show me, what my emotions are. But that's another thing. The more that I try to get her to feel or connect, it's almost like the more that she needs her own authority to say when.
Yes.
And I realized something recently, that I'm trying to control how she feels by making her, I don't know, by not examining it from a place of, well, what does she feel, more so than what am I afraid she's not doing by hiding her emotions, or what do I need to do to assist her by just letting her know it's safe?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's that distinction. And again, that comes back to my self-awareness. It always comes back to your own self-awareness. It can't be any other way. That's something big that I realized, like, it doesn't matter, empath or not, your energy is your own every day, all day, every night, all night. And that emotion can make us feel fear, because it feels almost like, well, you're going to take what I define myself as. And the more that you try to hold on to something that isn't yours, the less you feel connected to yourself. And I think that's the priority for the the light worker in us, is to see the light within the self, so that others can shine without our reaction or deletion of it. You know what I mean? Like, not our energy doesn't matter when it comes to somebody else's authority over themselves. And when we try to control that, either with a good intention or not, it usually backfires. And that's been hard for me to understand, because my energy was always, I got to fix. Oh, I feel that. Let me help you. Let me do that. Let me be, your awareness for you. And then a lot of times it does work when it's done in the right way, if the person is open to it, but not when it's a need for me to be okay with them, if that makes sense.
Yes, like, who needs what?
Yeah.
Well,
like, we really have only ourselves to, to understand and to honor. And when we find that we let go of something, of control, we immediately go into panic. That's the ego mind that we usually talk about. And the ego mind is not the personality. It's not the ego self. It's not the person you are. The ego mind, that we call the fear-based mind, is the one that tries to control environment in order to feel safe. And that safety doesn't come with control. It actually gets usurped. It gets, like, rejected, because we're seeing the other as separate from us, but not a part of the whole. Hold on, let me make that like clearer. When we try to feel somebody else's energy as our own, or we feel somebody else's energy and say it's our own, it's hard to make a relationship out of that. But when we see ourselves in awareness of the other as our love, like, responds to that, we can separate them from ourselves and still know they are part of who we are, because of the way that we love. And that's what presence does. You can't wrap your mind around that. There's just no way. You can only feel that, and that comes with presence.
That is so, I'm fascinated by this. There's so many things going through my head, but one of them is, so I've been really delving into the idea of collective consciousness, but also collective mindset. Right now, I'm the two things I'm really focusing on with that is in companies, in teams, groups, and even just in organizations, culture. I think that their energy bands together to create this collective environment that they're not always aware of, because mindset in general, we're not always aware of our mindset, the things that are driving the behaviors and thoughts and all of those things going through our minds. But I'm also looking at it in terms of families and relationships. And some people, for me at least, I feel sometimes influenced by other people's energy.
Yeah.
And I feel that happens most when I'm at my most, I'll use two words because they mean different but kind of similar things. One, when I'm at my most insecure, and also at my most vulnerable. And I think that there are things around both of those words that are important to dive into. But what I'm practicing more and more is really being super intentional about, this is where body of light comes in again, being in my own physicality
Yeah.
because I spent, it's seriously a huge intention for me that it's a new practice of being in my body. Because even after Body of Light, I seriously, my default has always been outside of
Yeah.
it. And so practicing getting into it is an undertaking that I'm happy to
Yeah.
do, but I have to remember. And now I
Yeah.
seem to be in this place where I am remembering more and more to do that. And as I do that, I'm noticing I'm feeling a lot more things like vibrationally and frequency wise when I'm not super constricted, because sometimes when I am in my body, I'm like, clenching.
Yeah.
In part, I think because I'm so sensitive to the energy that's my defense mechanism.
Right.
When I wasn't
Yeah.
aware of it. And now that I am becoming more aware, I can allow that in and look at it from an observer standpoint, that what's happening here, what's going on, and why am I clenching my throat or my heart? My heart chakra seems totally closed off right now. What's going on here? And that in combination with the energetic signature of our household is really interesting to me because I'm noticing things in a very different way, but also how influenced I have been for years to this energetic signature. I've contributed to it for sure, but I'm also very influenced by it in ways that I just never realized before. And then when I start looking at it in terms of my daughter, that's where what you were saying about control and, oh my gosh, is that hard to,
Girl, we can probably talk
oh my
let's
gosh.
talk after this because we're probably going through the same thing, not for nothing.
Seriously. And
But,
yeah, because our daughters are about the
but
same age. Mine just turned 12 and
yeah. Yeah, mine just turned 13. Mine's 13. So her energy is very important to me. Like
yeah.
she is my heart and soul, right? And I think that the closeness there often divides us because there's such an intention to want the other to be so proud and holy to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is that energy that we want to be seen by the other. And she wants me to see her. And I want her to see me in the role that I think that I should be to her. And that doesn't match what she feels she needs from me. And so that deep feeling of like, you are mine and I am yours. And for me to be real, you have to see me, for me to be connected. But it's almost like not seeing the trees, the forest for the trees. Like,
Yeah.
what's that saying? Like when
Yes,
we're
Stephen.
so close, her feelings reflect back to me my insecurity about me not being the right kind of mother for her. And
Gosh.
then her feelings go back to, well, she doesn't get me, she doesn't understand me, and I'm like, I'm doing everything to try.
Right.
And it's almost like a battleground of same resistance, right?
Yeah.
Same distance almost. But when I move away and I ask, okay, what do I need from the position of loving myself, not her? Because I was saying, like, what do I do? How do I fix this? What did I do to, like, did I make her insecure? I know that we had issues. She had to grow up too soon and blah, blah, blah. So I start blaming myself. And I say, you know what? She planned this life and never wanted you to take responsibility for her emotions. So part of her identity is learning her inner authority and learning how to do that through separation from you to a certain extent. And I was like, oh, so that's why I feel that resistance. Because some of it has to be done from her distance from me.
Yeah.
And as much as that hurts, it's not my fault. It's not me doing something wrong. It's me needing to understand her access point to herself without me being resistant to her energy about that.
So like
Which then
allowing
gives
that
me,
energy or accepting that
yeah,
energy.
because the more I try to resist that, the bigger it becomes in her.
Yeah.
But if I'm a softer place to land, then what I can do is offer her a different perspective when she's able to trust that my energy is not going to try and be authoritative in her energy, but more as an awareness to love for herself. Like, and so that's going to take me some practice for sure. But it's also a better feeling than I'm failing.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, we definitely have to continue this conversation because I think we're going through something very similar in terms of our observations and how, and I have this third person in this family who seriously is, I wish it weren't this way, but he is amazing at doing everything that I want to not have happen in terms of like authoritarianism, force. I mean, and I play off of that energy. It's like we are polar opposites. If he does something like today, he told our daughter she's going to the store with him. But he didn't invite her. He didn't, he's like, you're coming to the store with me. And she's like, no, because that's what she does, because she doesn't like to be told what to do. And their dynamic is, I am watching how I show up in that dynamic because I play such an incredible, integral part in almost like a background kind of way.
Yeah.
Their energy
Yeah.
feeds off of each other, and when I come in, I have great influence without always realizing it.
Yeah.
And I can sway public opinion, let's call it, and I can sway.
Yeah.
There's so many that three-way dynamic is just amazing to me, and it's hard to be in it and observe it at the same time because I easily get hooked. His behaviors mirror those of my dad's, and so always coming up with childhood stuff, it's great learning, but at the same point, if I'm not prepared for that learning, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Think, when you were talking about before, when you were saying like the observer position or being in it, like how the dynamic works, and then you say, well, I'm more aware of being in my body now and being like the one that reveals what it is that I'm feeling or sensing from these people. It's not that we won't feel them or be affected by them. I mean, that's what our emotions are saying. Like, this is your response to the situation. But it doesn't have to be that you are like critically condemning what is occurring. It could be that you're assessing it rather than fearing it. Because like when I fear what happened, I look at it like, whose fault is it? What do we have to fix? What do I have to change? Why is this happening? What's the pattern? What's the thing that I have to get rid of? But when I see it from a different aspect, which is like that point of access from the higher self, which is so that's that awakened state. That's the point I wanted to get to. Like the aware state is just the awakened state in every situation. It's not a life shift. It's an awareness shift. It's not like things change because you're aware of more. Your intention to receive more love during those moments makes it an enlightened moment. So enlightenment literally means to bring awareness to. It's not like, I'm psychic, so I'm awakened. I was psychic before I ever became awakened. And then, you know what I mean? Like I was continually asking, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And I had to switch that energy, like just had to, so that I stopped fearing who and what I am and how I can play with the universe. So my authority had to start with me, and understanding others' emotions did not make me responsible for them, but responding to them is my natural state. Like I will be responding to my family's energy. Like I can't help that, especially for us empathic people, like it just can't be helped.
Yeah.
But the feeling that I have to release some part of myself, or you know what I mean, like that feeling that I have to reject what I do to cause this, like that fear kind of like makes me out of body. Like it makes
Yep.
me not feel present, not feel loved, not feel like I have my own relationship to my daughter that is good. You know, like I feel like, oh God, this taints our whole relationship. But if I think about our relationship, we actually have a really good one. You know, like so there's this step by step processing that we go through that brings love to it, even if the original reaction is anger, upset, guilt, fear, or shame, even.
Yep.
When you have that awakening, so to speak, to every moment, you bring that light, that enlightened moment that says, fear is not of God. So what can be the issue here? The issue is, okay, she's upset. I need to let go of needing to control her upsetness, validate her, and feel that my energy was not the cause of it. I was just reacting to it. Like she was already like, you know, like if we talk about a situation recently, like she was already like amped up about something. I had yelled at her earlier for being on her phone too much, blah, blah, blah. And then I was asking her about something that was sensitive to her. And I could feel her like tighten up, right? And so then I started getting worried. Well, what's this about? Why is she being like this? Is something going on here? And she started to pick up my questioning, my like energy, like, oh, mom is criticized. She's about to criticize me, you know? And so she was being elusive with what I was asking her about. And I was getting angry because she was being elusive. And so all that energy, right? Like just, bah.
Yep.
And then I had to walk away and be like, what the frick just happened? And so the enlightened part, right? And this is not a higher than thou. This is just bringing the awareness to light. That's it. That's all it really is. That light part said her energy was responding to your energy, and your energy was responding to her energy, and the affection that you have for each other, you know, releases the moment you feel insecure about how the other is reacting to you, right? And so that kind of put me in a mode of, okay, all right, what do I need to do? How do I fix this? And the only thing I needed to do was let go of my fear that I had to fix it, and that I had to just release the anger in order to get to what the problem was. And the problem was that she felt strongly about something that she was afraid I was going to criticize. And I have to explain to her, well, sometimes I need to know what you're doing so that I can protect you. This is not about making you bad. This is about, you know, making sure that your decisions or your energy is not going to cause you more fear, like more frustration.
Yeah.
And so like, once we get to that understanding, it's a whole different ballgame. We're no longer reacting to emotions. We're in the solution part. So the initial fight isn't really something I have to beat myself up over, because the present moment gave me a perspective that I could use to help heal the situation.
That is so, this is so helpful for me, but I hope also for other people. I see a lot of conversation going on, so I think it's helpful. In fact, I know it is. But the thing that keeps resonating with me is going back to that initial mindset of everything is a problem, and so I think that because it does invoke fear, you know, having I don't want to see my daughter freaking out. And I know her patterns, and I can tell, just like you were saying, you saw all of these different things happened, a series of events that ended up in an eruption of sorts, right? And that happens with my daughter, with me, but also with my husband. And it's easier to see with the two of them than it is when I'm in it. But definitely I notice it. More so, I'm really trying to remember to be in my body and notice how it affects me. Because I grew up in the family was fine, but there was a lot of conflict between younger siblings and my parents kind of freaking out in distress about certain things, and me in the middle as observer. It felt like a lot of the time in this family, and I developed quite an aversion to conflict. So when conflict comes up, I have a very specific physical response that I never was aware of until recently. You know, I'm so happy to hear when people who are much younger than me notice these things sooner, because I'm 53. It's like that's what happens when the conflict happens, and why I always want to run away. There's a
Yeah.
survival aspect to it. There is a fear aspect. Well, the fear drives the survival instinct in ways I
Mm.
never realized. And when things are in conflict and I assume it's a problem, all of those things happen.
Yes.
When I look at it as, well, we are humans, we are emotional beings. Sometimes we don't agree, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and sometimes, yes, my daughter does things that make me fearful. Sometimes because I don't want her, you know, I'm trying to control her experience. I don't want her to have those
Yeah.
experiences I had.
Mm.
My husband had at some point said, well, how do you know that it's going to be a problem for her the way it was for you? Which I thought was pretty impressive.
Ooh.
You know, he has
Well,
these
that was
nuggets.
impressive.
I know.
I gotta give a star for that one.
I know. I'm like, man, you know, I hate it when he does that, you know, because he's so good at it. Like,
Right?
I just want to be mad and I can't, you know. And,
I
um,
know.
but
I
it
know
was
my wife helped me actually get to that realization today about my daughter, and I was like,
I know. But I'm very grateful for that lesson because it was a really good one. Because
yeah,
you know, I don't want her to have those experiences, but it's her experience. I don't have control over those
yeah,
things. I have control over how I am, and how I receive those things. You know, I receive her responses to things and how it makes me feel, and also, you know, how I can be a mother, like you were saying, in terms of seeing her. And these images we have of what it means to be a parent, um,
yeah,
oh my gosh, they're so socially contrived in many, many ways, and contrived from our families, which I still call social because, you know,
yeah,
they were created from other people, you know, in their families
yeah,
and in society. And I call, you know, there's, for my husband, I call it the daddy, what do I call it? The daddy gene or something. And I've forgotten the name I call it now. It's this weird thing that I have seen. It may not just be with dads, but I've noticed it with my dad. I've noticed it with other people in my family, the dads. I've noticed it with my husband, where they can be perfectly happy and content and everything's going well, and then their child comes in, does one thing, and they're on them. You know, like, what are you doing? Don't do that. You know, blah
yeah.
blah blah. You know, do it or
Well,
else. You
because we
know.
judge each other. We judge each other. Oh, your kid's acting a fool. Oh, you're a bad parent. You
Yeah.
must be, you know, like your home must be bad. You must be bad. Your kid is bad. And so it's a judgment on you as a person, you know?
Yeah.
So I noticed that too. Like when we go to people's house, like people always comment on your kid's behavior.
Oh,
Now you want to teach them social acceptability. You don't want to teach them they can do whatever.
right.
But you also want to give them like a freedom to have their emotions be soothed, not catered to. I think we
Yes.
spoke about that in
I
one
think
of
we
our
might have.
last videos, yeah. But I think that you brought up a really, really powerful point that when we try to control others' experience, then we're telling them what to feel about it too.
Yeah.
So if I say, oh, you know, I mean, unless there's real damage. So when my father was training for boxing, my father was a championship boxer. Yeah, he was
I think you told
middleweight.
me.
Yeah, yeah. And he used to run and train on the weekends at 5:30, 6 a.m. And that was earlier than I had to wake up for school. But he would bring us because he thought, no, this is good for you.
That's
You have
right.
to train, you have to run. Oh my God, I hated running. Hated running. But you know what that did for me? Like it pissed me off and I always never wanted to go. And my mom would just be like, no, just go. And when I went to the military and I had to run, guess who knew how to move past, you know, the plateau? Guess who knew how
Yeah.
to, you know, just get the job done? Guess who knew how to wake up early, you know, without being pissed off? You know what I mean? So it's so funny. We think some of the things that happen to us or are connected to us aren't powerful parts of what we ask
Hmm.
for.
Yeah.
And just the fact that my father was, and I think I explained this to you, my father is an immigrant from Italy. He came here when he was 16 years old, very little education, all that stuff. And he grew up in a very like poor town, in a very poor family. And when they immigrated here, it was like, you know, that typical story, 6 people in a one bedroom apartment, things like that. And I didn't have that perspective when I was a kid. I didn't know, you know? So what he was doing for me was giving me what he didn't have. You know, like trying everything that he did and doing everything that he did for us. I mean, it resulted in a lot of his own fears and insecurities and things coming out, which, you know, we can spend all day talking about that. But the identity of him was pursuing a career that gave him the ability to give us a life and a powerful attention that we can accomplish anything. And as much damage as my dad did in a lot of ways, the one thing he gave me was the feeling that I could accomplish anything. That even if I feel fear, I needed to do it because it made me happy to do it, that I had the strength to do it. And as emotional and as sensitive as I am, that push out of my comfort zone gave me the ability to understand how to perceive something even if it's not done yet. Like even if I don't feel like comfortable in it, sometimes the discomfort is exactly what I need in order to move forward, or to recognize a new opportunity. And so as damaging as some of the things were, a big portal like of that opening, of that awareness through his life gave me what I do today. You know, like the fact that I'm a personal trainer and an exercise physiologist and now a spoken word channeler, these things would have never been powerful for me to really access if I didn't have the inspiration of knowing that this man who came from nothing was able to be in, I mean, he was in he was in movies. He was in I mean, my father's got a very Italian face. He was in The Godfather. He was in Godfather 3. He was in The Sopranos. You know, like he did different things in his life. He never like shamed us for wanting something big. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that perspective gives me a whole freedom to not see myself as a victim of what he couldn't provide me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. What a powerful story too. I mean, you know, wow. I love that story. One of the questions that I came up with, and I may have asked this again because I'm still stuck with it, and it has to do with that discomfort, pushing yourself out of the comfort zone. And when do you, you know, I've always had the belief that when it's meant to be, it happens, because in my experience, those things have happened quickly and easily. Big life changes are things that I've always fallen into, not always intentionally, but they've always been like, it's like, I know this is a good thing because the doors are open and I'm going through, right? Well, more lately, everything feels like I was using an analogy, or maybe it's a metaphor, with my husband yesterday about I was doing this thing, writing a really short article. But every step of the way, it felt like I was scaling the face of a cliff, like just trying to get up this part. And I mean, it took me all day. I was trying to enjoy the process, but it was not happening for me. Yeah. And there's a part of me that's like, well, is it that this is a way to test my resolve as to whether this is what I really want? Or is it the
testing? That's a really good question. Ooh, okay.
and so or is it just the wrong thing? You know?
Okay. I love that you brought this up, because what I describe as the comfort zone is really the fear zone. So comfort is really not comfortable, like when you think about it, because you're in constant fear of what you can't do, or what is not available to you, or is whatever it is that's keeping you out of the synchronicity, out of the expansion, out of the higher perspective. Those things are uncomfortable because they're not being connected to us in ways that feel loving, right? They feel like pressure. They feel like putting you down. Until you do this, you're not able to do that, you know? Yeah. And that comfort zone that I'm talking about, I mean, it's a common phrase, but it's not accurate. It's not comfortable to not fulfill your potential. It's not comfortable to stay in fear and in pain and in worry and in hostility. Like, it's not comfortable to stay in lack. Those things aren't comfortable. But the problem is that we fear our greatness. You've heard that before, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because then it feels like we are responsible for it.
Mm.
And that responsibility can feel very uncomfortable.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I think is the biggest issue with people who are afraid to step out of what they've defined themselves as, to step into something they love or something that they desire. And it's not about you're so comfortable, because if we're comfortable, we're happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's why I mean it's like not really accurate to say the comfort zone. The comfort zone is not comfortable. It's just that we're not able to see ourselves worthy of the thing that we want yet. And I think, but I will say that, you know, just through the study of astrology, Akashic records, and all like life patterns, I'm a life pattern girl. Like I just see the bigger picture, and I speak to patterns rather than I do specifics.
Mm-hmm.
And people who like specifics don't really get me. They want to be direct, specific, and I'm like, well, you know, you can try to get me and I can try to get you, but it's not usually going to work. But honestly, like the feeling that we have about moving forward into our greatness feels like we're not good enough now. And I think that that's not the case. The greatness is just the greatness we have potentially manifesting that's calling us.
Mm.
And we're fearing that step as if we're not ready for it. And I think that the more we fear the results, the harder it is to be on the path to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The more we fear not being able to do what we want to do, the harder it is to get on the path in the first place. So I think that the first step to being uncomfortable is acknowledging, well, which things are telling me yes and which things are telling me no. If your current situation is providing block after block after block, and you continue fighting that path, guaranteed there's an easier path. You're just afraid to move out of the same old pattern. So that's what I mean. Like, to get uncomfortable is to be told, like, all right, this isn't comfortable. Watch when you step out of the old way, you'll be comfortable in the new. It's just not as predictable. So that's where that we were talking about, that ego fear-based mind comes in. Predictability means safety. And so people might call that comfort, but it's again not the right word to really describe, because if I'm comfortable, I feel good.
Yeah. Is it the safety zone? Is it
Maybe like feeling it's the fear zone.
Mm.
I think it's the fear zone. Courage is different than fear. Courage can feel unknown. Courage could feel fearful, like in a way. This is, you know, courage is being in fear and taking the step forward anyway.
Yep.
And I think fear doesn't go away. It just aligns to more strength, or more weakness, right? So courage is like taking the step that you know is going to put you in a better space, even if it's not the right answer right now. Like courage says, I'm no longer putting up with this lack, with this fear, with this suffering, with this hostility, with this trajectory that only keeps me lack, right?
Yep.
So the fear is, what if it doesn't work? But that's a fear we can deal with when we're in courage. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
so it's very close together. I think it's, you know what I mean? Like I can wobble. Like for me, I wobble back and forth that line all the time.
Yep. So
Like,
do
no,
I.
I can do it. Yeah. And so I think that's okay. I think that's so okay.
Well, I had just mentioned to a friend of mine the other day that I felt like I was wobbling on my way to a quantum leap, which is how I look at things. It's like we're in this kind of same pattern, and it takes a leap into a different pattern, which is a different vibration. Maybe, I see it visually, so it's almost like rings, and it's almost like they're up leveling in a way. It does mean better for me.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so,
of course.
what's it called? Something of the universe, a fabric of the universe
Yeah.
old, they had some series, and there's a book. Series is a lot more palatable, I think, in many ways. But he talks about quantum leaps, and he shows it, or they show it like a little atom going back and forth and back and forth, or maybe it's a molecule, but it goes back and forth and it wobbles, and then eventually it's on the new path. But
Oh, yeah.
they never see that. They don't see it. They see the wobble, and then they see it in a new location. And that's
Yes.
always stuck with me, because I think that's how change happens.
Oh my God, I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind. Thank you. I'm going to love that. I think so. We're coming back to the original start of the program, which was the present moment, because when you're present, you are aware of what can come about, and you're not in the fear of either one. You know what I mean? Like you're not, like it's almost like it is easier. Like, so, when Abraham talks about the path of least resistance, and you go, oh, life is not easy. Life is not always easy. I don't think that she means easy, like you sit back on your butt and you don't do anything. I think she means the path that doesn't increase the fear, like, or doesn't increase the hostility or the rejection of self. The path that includes more love is the one that's easier. Like, so the past, like 2 times we've been on, we talked a lot about emotional clarity, right? Like we always talk about that because I think that's our connection, but we also have this like dynamic energy that's very adaptable and mutable. Like both of us have that mutable sign to us. We are very adaptable to the energy around us. We have this very strong ability to reflect our environment and learn something from it. I think that the more that we accept that part of us, the less we'll fight trying to step away from what's happening. You know what I mean? Like it's not about changing who we are. It's about aligning to what is our present, energy. And our energy is very adaptable, very mutable, very like derisive. So we look at things and we derive energy from it. We derive an awareness from it. And sometimes that can feel like very out of sorts with our own body, because we're so used to engaging with our environment and reflecting it, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that's a powerful awareness to have. It allows us to show people how to be adaptable without changing the self, without changing who we are. I think it lets people see us as communicators, not as staunch, like your husband, it's got to be this way, like you were saying, Yeah. But for us, we know how to mutate, mm-hmm. how to receive, how to create from what we learn. And I think that is always our portal to the now moment. Like seeing the self as separate could never be what we need to understand about ourselves, right? Yeah. For some people, they're very much like that. So like for an Aries possibly, or for an earth sign, that they're very like grounded in themselves. But for mutable, like air and water signs, you'd say that our power is our awareness of our environment. So when we see that, we can reflect it with love for ourselves rather than fear of what's happening in the environment. And I think that's just coming through from spirit right now, because I think that's for both of us and for anybody else out there that feels that way. Again, your own authority doesn't get usurped because you're an adaptable, mutable person, as long as you have the self-awareness. I think it's the awareness that matters for each person, not how they act and not what they do or perform as, right? Yeah. Not everybody's going to do things the way we do them. Some people might go, oh, she don't know what she's talking about. You have to be strong. You have to do this. You have to do that. You can't just adapt to your environment. You have to be the leader of your environment. You have to be single, like there's many ways to do what we do. And there's many ways to see others through our pane of glass that we look through. But there's also the awareness of, how do I receive you? Mm-hmm. And how are you receiving me? And that's simply the dichotomy. That's the duality. You versus me versus you, or me connecting to you and asking myself, how do I receive you? And is it good? Mm-hmm. If it's good, then great. Like if it's good, then align it. If it's not, release it. And releasing has nothing about rejection. It's just moving away. And I think that's the path of least resistance, is to move away from what doesn't serve us in a way that makes us feel good. Like, not that you shouldn't face challenges, but that you should learn what does damage and what is helping you to reveal love, you know?
Oh, yeah. That revealing love part is a big thing. With my example, there's a part of it that is, I am questioning how much of what I'm attempting to do is based on a sense of obligation or should versus bringing forth true joy. When I have time at my fingertips, I always go towards the light. I'm expanding, I'm learning about, all of these wonderful things within the Lightworkers Lab, the intuitive intensive, other areas as well, chakras, auras, energy, quantum physics, in a layman's way. What I'm not gravitating towards are the things that I was trying to do yesterday. Although there are aspects of that I do find joy in, the means of getting those is where the hurdle is. The way I'm trying to go forth into a business context through like LinkedIn or, that kind of social media, all the things you have to do to build a business. For some reason in that particular form, whenever I go on it, I feel bummed out. There's a huge pattern developing of me going on that particular platform, and then I get like I tank in terms of love.
That's how you know. Don't go there anymore.
Okay.
Not for you. Not for you. That's how I know. That's how I know when I stop receiving the energy of what I'm creating from a certain like idea, I know it's time to put it down. Like whatever I try to push out there that I'm not really aligned to, but I think I have to, creates a resistance to me. And that's why she says like path of least resistance, because it's not about not trying. It's not doing. It's about knowing what is right, knowing what is creative, what is communicating a journey, a relationship. Like we have to look for the relationship to things rather than what is right or wrong. The relationship to what we do is more important than is it going to get me the result, because the result is the relationship to it. I've had to recently let go of a few projects or a few things that I was doing out of necessity that I thought. And once I stopped doing that and I started enjoying the progress again, I can't tell you how my business so reflects the way that I receive it. So if I receive my business as a positive thing, if I look at my business as, look at how much I've grown in such a short amount of time, or look at what I've been able to accomplish thus far, I stop fearing what I haven't done yet. Because sometimes I can go, oh, wow, I should have done that. I could be there already. I could be doing this. I should have taken that opportunity. I should have had that done already. They told me, 5 years ago, write a book. The book's not done yet. All that stuff. Well, all that did was put fear into me and pressure to get it done. Once I stopped, I got new people, new programs, new ideas, new people to help me. I mean, I just got somebody in my inbox yesterday because I've been saying I want to receive people that I can talk to in person again. I really enjoyed that when I was in the military. And a recent client of mine inboxed me yesterday and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a class? I can get at least 5 or 6 people to you and I can look into the venue for you. And I was like, okay.
Awesome.
You know what I mean? So that's the kind of like attachment to fear that I was talking about, like fear that I had to do it all on my own, that I wasn't ready for that. The moment I got guided to say, you know what, I'm ready, regardless of where I feel like my business is right now, boom, the next day that was in my inbox.
That is so powerful. And I am noticing that we've actually run a little over time.
Oops, sorry.
No, that's okay. I had my timer set, but I turned it on late, and so I didn't realize. I just want to thank you so much, Lauren. I love having you on the show. I'm sure I'll have you on again, because it'll be like Cheers, and everyone can go, Lauren.
Yay!
And I'm
Thank
getting
you
my
for having
earbud
me.
clapping.
Yeah, yeah.
That's spirit coming through. It only comes through sometimes, and it's always in an affirmative moment. So, well, thanks again, Lauren. Thanks everyone for watching. I wish you all a wonderful weekend or rest of your week whenever you happen to watch this, if you're watching the replay. And yes, thank you. have fun, everyone.